Young audiences in particular watch more YouTube on all devices than Netflix and iPlayer combined, experimenting with things like the titling, SEO, thumbnails. It's all that Mr. Beast stuff, and he's there and goes, "Oh, we make 700 thumbnails and replace them every 30 seconds. Yeah. No one else can do that because they don't have the resource to do it, but you need to have a data-led approach to all of this stuff. I think the paradigm has already shifted and a lot of people just haven't realised.
Hello and welcome to another TellyCast. I'm Justin Crosby, and in today's show, we're diving into the digital-first world of content creation with Matt Risley, Managing Director of 4 Studio at Channel 4. From mastering YouTube to redefining engagement strategies, Matt shares insights on how 4 Studio is shaping the future of video production and distribution. Don't forget to subscribe to TellyCast. We're available on all major podcast platforms and YouTube, where we have exclusive interviews with the movers and shakers of the content industry and panel sessions from the recent TellyCast Digital Content Forum. So hit that subscribe button and don't miss a thing. Matt, welcome to TellyCast. How are you?
Good. How are you, Justin?
I'm very well, thank you. Bit cold outside, but it's nice and warm in here under the studio lights. So good to see you. You're down from Leeds, aren't you, today? So Thanks for coming and visiting us.
Thank you. I was going to say it is chilly down here, but bearing in mind I woke up in Yorkshire, it is a little bit colder up there. But it's down in London for a few days.
Yeah, good. Oh, well, welcome and great to have you on the show. So let's talk about Channel 4 and your digital-first strategy. That's been obviously a really major driver of growth for Channel 4. Tell us about 4 Studio in particular and how 4 Studio fits within that strategy.
So I'd say Channel 4 has probably been embracing a really digital-first strategy for about 5 years now. It's about 5 years ago that we really kind of made a point of pivoting everything that we are doing into becoming a digital-first broadcaster. And that's not just trying to get people to watch content on streaming. It's also operationally how becoming digital from a marketing point of view, from a commercial point of view. And 4 Studio was kind of born coincidentally around the same kind of time. So 4 Studio was born very late 2019. And we were set up to do all of those things. So we're quite unique within Channel 4 in that we have a P&L. We're kind of like a business within a business. We diversify revenues, we reach people, we try to innovate and push creative boundaries. So I'd say we are probably the pointy end of the spear in what Channel 4 is trying to do and drive that kind of change in kind of behaving digitally.
Channel 4 has obviously got a really strong brand identity and something that's been developed over years. How do you make sure that remains consistent, both across the linear broadcast network, but also across digital first as well?
I'd say it's trickier than it may initially look. The reality is our team, we essentially own the end-to-end social strategy. So if you see any content from Channel 4 on any social platform, it's come through my team in one way, shape or form. And we make and publish tens of thousands of pieces of content every single year across 100 different channels across 7 platforms. So working out how Channel 4 shows up in those spaces is tricky because actually TikTok has a different tone of voice to YouTube, which again is different to a 50-year-old watching linear TV. So it is a trick. I think we have really strong brand guidelines. We've got a really strong tone of voice. We have people in our team who work very closely with marketing and creative kind of teams within Channel 4 to make sure that we know what that means. And I think Channel 4 is quite unique in that the content that it works with can be everything from a hard-hitting Russell Brand documentary through to a documentary called My Massive Cock, through to Bake Off. So I think understanding how Channel 4 shows up within that in every touch point, really strong tone of voice, really strong brand guidelines, and then people who know these platforms and know how this content should show up in those spaces.
Yeah, I love your Threads account, actually. That's something that has really sort of been really successful since the platform launched. Do you have a team looking at Threads, or do you have one individual who's maybe the master at Threads?
So we've got kind of individual genre-based teams who then kind of own channels across different platforms. The team who run Threads is kind of our master brand team, so they are the ones who really do get the tone of voice. And it's brilliant. When we knew that thing was coming, I don't think many people had much notice that Threads was going to be a platform. And I think the days of kind of X or Twitter being the space where brands can show up and be funny and have a personality, that kind of went away quite a few years ago. So when we saw a new text-based platform was on the horizon, we just thought, bugger it, should we just try something and kind of use it as a space to really be creative and kind of bring back the Twitter of old? And it is working. Like, we have been told that the engagement rate on that channel is 500% more than our competitors. And it really does come down to really smart creatives who are kind of given a bit of wiggle room just to play around and have some fun. And I think it shows. I think it's great.
So with all the different platforms and ensuring that Force Studio creates that identity across all those different platforms, as you say, tens of thousands of pieces of content. How do you approach content creation? Because there's an enormous amount of content that's being created specifically for platforms. And you've obviously got a team of experts doing it. How do you just approach that? Because it's mind-boggling the amount of content that you're creating.
You'll probably hear me say this quite a bit. It's about just having data-led, audience-first strategies. So it doesn't matter what the content is, whether it's a 60-second vertical piece of content or an original short-form 15-minute thing that we're commissioning or creating. We have teams who really, really understand the audiences and the platforms that they're putting this stuff on. And that really is the key behind everything that we do, because it is different. It's going to be different based on what channel you're publishing something to. And much as, I don't know how to say this politely, I think a YouTube short, a TikTok, an Instagram reel, they're all kind of similar in what they are doing. So I think there's efficiencies you can make in regards to understanding how to just make a piece of content that could go lots of different places. However, I think it's a race to the bottom if you just start flinging the same content everywhere and just hoping it sticks. You do need to come back to, who is the audience I have on this channel? What do they want? Could this work? And kind of go from there.
It's very tempting though, isn't it? I mean, the fact is that, it's a bit lazy as well, I guess, ultimately, but looking at repurposing content, do you make decisions across different platforms that this piece of content, even if you recut it, isn't going to work for a particular platform, rather than, so you can be that brutal about it and just say it's not going to work. Let's try something else.
You need to be. I think, algorithms reward consistency of whatever the hell is going out there and who it's reaching. So, rewind a few years when we first started Force Studio, we inherited a lot of content that had been commissioned with the presumption it would just go out and do well. It was good content, but it died an utter death because it can't work like that of just flinging stuff out. So you also need social creatives who are kind of empowered to push back as well on people who maybe don't understand the audiences that you're trying to build or who don't understand these platforms or how they work. So we definitely say no to a lot, which is a fun internal kind of challenge.
Yeah.
But also we try to do that through the lens of really like explaining why we're making that decision. And most content now, we have created audiences, organic audiences who are receptive to it. So we're quite lucky in regards to, we have these audiences we've built, but you need to be quite selective with what goes on there.
So we're talking about short form content and original or cut down content, depending on what it is that Force Studio is producing. But let's talk about long form content. That's a particular interest to our more traditional TV industry audience that listens to TellyCast. So talk us through the journey of long form content that Force Studio is working on for Channel 4. Obviously, there's a lot of that is catalogue, but there's also a lot of that is digital originals. So can you talk us through the evolution of how Force Studio has approached long form content?
I think I'll probably start by clarifying what I mean when we say long form, because everyone has different definitions. So for us, long form is kind of 20-minute plus. The majority of the long form that we put out is either long compilations of clips from shows, or some of it is digital original content, which tends to be around the 15 to 20-minute mark. But the vast majority of what we have to play with, it is kind of our full episodes, essentially, things that you would see if you logged into streaming or if you turned on the TV. About a year and a half ago, we started publishing some of that content on YouTube. And the reality is YouTube is a streaming destination already. I think the paradigm has already shifted and a lot of people just haven't realized. So in America, I think recent data shows it is the biggest SVOD. Like, it beats Netflix by a third in regards to people watching YouTube on televisions. Over here, Evan Shapiro did some research recently that pointed out that young audiences in particular watch more YouTube on all devices than Netflix and iPlayer combined. So YouTube is a place where, yes, you can get 60-second content, but increasingly it is a TV viewing experience as well. So we basically publish most of the content that we have on our streaming platform on YouTube now, and it is working. So we have seen phenomenal growth year on year. We are generating over 100 million views just in the UK on that content every year. And the really validating, lovely thing is, well, I suppose one is we've looked at the data and we do not think these audiences cannibalize. We think these are additive audiences. Secondly, you go on my LinkedIn, people are leaving comments saying, I know that when that went out on air, it got X number of views, or when it went out streaming, it got Y number of views, but I can see on YouTube, it got even more. Yeah. So it's not one size fits all. It's not the same for every single show. But it is interesting that I think we're evolving into a world where people need to start considering YouTube as a television destination as much as it is somewhere where, you're swiping on your phone when you're on the loo, or you're, watching something on your laptop when you're making a sandwich. It is all of those things and more. So it's been a very successful part of our digital growth and acceleration, I think, as a streamer.
So let's have a look at some 4 studio content. We've got some branded content, we've got some 4.0, and also we've got some short form documentary content. Let's have a look.
Right, let's make a pizza. Hey, what goes on first?
Sauce.
Close those eyes. Oh, that's a big one. That's a big one, wasn't it? You are a tomatoey lad, aren't you? Of course you are. What time is it?
It's cheese time!
Oh, it's cheese time. Just finish you off. A big round connoisseur, aren't you?
Like the world's
Like a
biggest pizza.
You're the tastiest man.
Yeah.
The cleverest boy. There you go. It's like you're at a spa now, isn't it?
So relaxed.
Yeah, there you go. I think we should have a bit of garlic dip, don't you? Garlic and herb dip.
Oh, man.
Look at you, feeding a family of 4. Yeah. Who's ready for the oven? Yeah, you ready for the oven?
I'm ready. Yeah.
Yeah, of course you are. Yeah. Gene, get the big shovel. Don't worry about that, we'll sort that out. That's it, keep coming. Keep coming. There, into the oven. That's it. There you go.
Gary was my big brother. He was 2 years older than me. Gary was the gang leader, someone who's ready to spend life in jail over a name of a gang. Relationship with brother Gary was the best relationship I've ever had. Unconditional love, unconditional kindness. He was my dad, he was my best friend, he was my soulmate, he was my brother, he was my love. When everyone else neglected me, he was my comfort. Gary was my all. He's a killer. He taught us how to be venomous, like buying guns for the gang members, shooting people, selling drugs, robbing people, drive-bys. So Gary's always been someone who thinks outside the box. Most gang members had the guns in the jeans, under your coat so police couldn't see it. I had a 9, Gary had a 45, and we're riding, and we've got into a particular estate, and Gary's swore gone, get your effing guns out, and he's already riding like that, so we're all riding with our handed ones, riding like that. So when we got back, I'm like, why? He's like, bro, if we see him, we can just start shooting. They've got to do all that. That's at least 2 seconds. You've got to drop on him. If you're going to take it serious, be serious. He wasn't a joker. If Gary would have just told me to go across the street and shoot that guy, I would have asked no questions. I would have went across there and shot him.
You see the guy with the big arms?
The one to do right in front of you.
Right in front of you. Go up to him and roar like a lion.
Oh.
Look at his arms.
I can lift you up.
You got big arms, bro. Yeah.
Can I feel your muscles, please?
Can I feel your biceps, please? No?
Oh, God.
Did you expect it to have the sort of success that it's had when you actually started to really lean into it? I mean, has it been a surprise?
Yes and no. I would say gut instinct and looking at the data, you would presume you're gonna, find an audience. Speaking honestly, the first year or so, we really did a lot of testing and learning. We looked at what was working, what wasn't. You throw some things out and presume they'd do amazing numbers, and they just didn't. So we probably had 9 to 12 months of a lot of testing and learning, a lot of working with other internal teams, compliance, legal, business affairs, commissioning, to work out what can you do to move that dial. And I'm not going to give away our secrets, but after about 9 to 12 months, we nailed it. A big part of that comes from having specific audiences for this content. Good example would be we have a docs channel, Channel 4 Documentaries on YouTube, does very well, drives lots of views. Some content we put out on there thinking it would do well, and it didn't. So we've actually fragmented, I suppose, the portfolio of channels that we have now around documentaries. So we've got one for people who love kind of blue lights content. We've got one for people who love emergency content. We've got one for people who love hard-hitting current affairs. That was key to us actually working out how to give content that hadn't worked before a new lease of life.
So this is really splitting down to the niche, right? And sub niches, and really boiling it down to almost as the more niche, the better, right? And is that something that YouTube has been rewarding, the content?
Yeah, I would say niche and specificity of audience, consistency of uploads where you can, and then understanding like how long is the content? Where do you think this is going to do best? Experimenting with things like the titling, SEO, thumbnails. It's all that Mr. Beast stuff, you know, and he's there and goes, oh, we make 700 thumbnails and replace them every 30 seconds. No one else can do that because they don't have the resource to do it. But you need to have a data-led approach to all of this stuff. And that is what we have found works.
So let's talk about digital originals. You've had some real success in digital originals over the last couple of years. Talk us through the idea of digital original content from 4 Studio and where you see it going from now.
Yeah, I would say, again, we've been on a journey, right? So when I joined, we had a lot of different kind of digital strands and digital kind of content initiatives. And some of them worked, some of them didn't. I think 4.0 was the best example of us being really clear in our strategy of, even before we commission anything, what are we trying to do? Where are the audiences we want to hit? What is the purpose of this? And what is like a 3-year vision? So 4.0 is the poster child of, for me, how to do digital original content. It's quite unique in that it feels like a blurring of the creator worlds and like the broadcaster worlds, and that's really hard to do. So we're very lucky that we have a brilliant digital commissioning team who really get these audiences, they get this content, and I think we've created something that feels very Channel 4 and yet feels very creator-led and is kind of the blurring of those worlds. But for that to succeed, huge alignment before we even got going, and a real strategy and a commitment to seeing it through and seeing what it could do. And now it is far and away the youngest, most engaged audience we have on any channel in the business. So, but to do that, there was a lot of internal persuading. There was a lot of kind of alignment between teams, and all of it has to be data-led. So
I've seen other public service broadcasters really sort of quite resistant to YouTube and putting not only catalogue content for that very reason that you talked about, which was the worry about it cannibalizing audiences. But it's been fascinating to see how you've moved right the way to becoming a leader in this space. So talk us through that original strategy then, in terms of, obviously you're delivering on your public service broadcaster remit when it comes to commissioning and everything you're doing and reaching hard to reach audiences or underserved audiences. Can you give us a sense of roughly how much original content you're commissioning a year, and what sort of ideas your commissioning team is looking for?
Yeah, so 4.0 has one episode of something going out every week. So we kind of rotate and have lots of different strands, but that's 52 episodes of essentially 15 to 20 minute content a week. We also commission short form documentaries. And there's other bits and bobs. There's a couple of things on the horizon that will be launching early this year that I can't talk about yet. But I think from the point of view of digital originals, it broadly buckets into 4.0, factual and documentaries, and then a couple of other things that will be announced soon. And then obviously we have branded content as well. So that's kind of the slightly kind of third angle on it, but that is still short form content that is funded and is good. So but editorially, it kind of buckets into those themes.
And typically branded content when it comes to Frost Studio, is that produced internally mainly, or is that, again, you're still working with external agencies?
Yeah, so we make a little bit of it internally, but the vast majority is still with externals. And again, been very lucky, worked with some incredible salespeople and some commissioners where it is it's carved out its own niche within the market. Because we control editorially what that is at the end of the day. So there's a lot of collaboration between salespeople and the brand and commissioning. But ultimately, what differentiates our branded content, I suppose some other digital first publishers, is that editorial control beats everything else. And we make that quite clear before we go on that journey with a brand. And I think what you end up with is content that is genuinely quite entertaining, sometimes mad, but it is good content. The brand, if they know what they signed up for, is really happy with it. It performs incredibly well organically because actually it's good content in the first place. So we're quite lucky in that we've kind of taken TV experience and TV skill sets and editorial quality and kind of migrated that into the short mid-form world.
And I know you can't speak on behalf of other broadcasters, clearly.
Can I? No.
Well, you can have a go, yeah. But when it comes to where you think the TV industry, the traditional TV industry, is going to be in the next couple of years, I mean, we've obviously seen ITV Studios and ITV as a whole sort of really sort of looking towards digital and really starting to lean into that as well. Do you think that it's an imperative for broadcasters now to actually have a digital first strategy? Do you think it's crucial that they do for survival? Because things are changing so quickly, right?
Yeah, I'd say Pandora's box is open and it ain't closing. So, and you look at the consumption habits of younger people in particular, they are so far ahead of the curve of traditional media businesses. And the reality is it isn't going to be long until they have the purchasing power and they're the ones making decisions in households. So, everything from where is your content and how are they finding it, which is increasingly difficult, through to what type of content is it that people want to consume. I can't imagine a world in which everything is Mr. Beast. I can't imagine a world in which everything is 30-minute game shows that were commissioned from the 80s. We're probably evolving into a world where it's a bit of all of that. And you need to understand how, as a traditional media business, to kind of stretch and flex your approach to creativity, I think, and be a little bit receptive to data and insight and not be scared of that. I think you need to think creatively about format and tone and how you are finding people in the first place. And I think those two things actually go hand in hand. And historically, they haven't had to, whereas now they do. So, I can't imagine a world in which anything slows down, is I suppose what I'm saying.
And for those more traditional TV production companies who have had a really tough couple of years, and this year looks like it's going to be pretty much the same, I think, it's pretty certain that there's commissioning levels are not going to return to where they were 2, 3, 4 years or pre-pandemic. Do you have any advice for them? Because basically, much of the TV industry has turned from B2B to a B2C approach, right? And that's a very different type of business, obviously. And as you mentioned, different skill sets, data and learning data and learning how to interpret data is really, really important. What would be your advice to more traditional TV production companies who are having a bit of a tough time right now?
I'd probably say a couple of things. One would be work with somebody who is a digital expert. It could be a consultant, could be somebody you get into your business to, on a 6-month contract. Don't be afraid of that kind of digitality. Is that a word? I don't know. Don't be afraid of that in the first place, but try to lean on people who know what that is to help advise you and steer you. I think if you start from that point, you get a little bit more comfortable with the speed of change. Then it's about thinking innovatively. I think it's about how your content is made, where it is going. Are you able to sell it on in different ways to YouTube networks in another country? Are you able to think about how you create one piece of content and really flex with it and stick it in lots of different places? And then I think you've got the point of view of, are there communities you can be building yourselves relatively cheaply? Because we exist in a world now where You know, you can stick something on YouTube and find an audience for content that previously you just had down the back of a sofa. You're seeing a lot of especially older content find a whole new life on YouTube, which is fascinating. And I think as you move forward, work with commissioners and work with broadcasters and streamers to try to get those things over the line, but then think inevitably about what comes next, I think.
Yeah. So are you saying that a TV production company now should be approaching the industry as a sort of a more of a mixed model rather than just the old B2B, you know, try and get a commission and then try and sell the international rights for those once the commission's done? I mean, a lot of production companies, thanks to terms of trade, have got really great catalogues. And as you say, you know, it's really interesting to see perhaps how a show from 20 years ago might take off in an international territory, right? And that could actually lead to a new commission somewhere along the line, which happens, right?
Yeah, 100%. And it's interesting as well. There's different ways you can monetize this content, right? So something I haven't chatted about yet is within Channel 4, we have 4 Sales, which is a sales house. Due to a unique partnership with YouTube, we can sell our inventory against the content that we put out there, which means you make more money, basically, from the views that you're getting. We partner with production companies and agencies to help leverage that across their networks as well. So I would say you've got your baseline sticking content out yourself, monetizing content approach.
But that's not easy though, is it? As
No.
well, that's the other thing. It's like you inferred that, you know, it took you a little while to get things going with 4 Studio, and speaking from, you know, much smaller, my experience on YouTube, we're not yet a year in, and we're adding subscribers very, very slowly, but steadily, and being consistent with content. And I'm really sort of starting to see the impact in terms of how long people are watching for, what sort of content. And that's, I guess, on a much bigger scale is what you've experienced and what any production company's got to learn as well. It's like, it's the long term, right? It's the long game that you've got to play.
Yeah, and the honest answer is it's exhausting and it's not easy and it's not straightforward. And also because it's social platforms, it changes every other week.
Yeah.
So, I mean, anybody who's seen the news over the last month, these things change rapidly. So that's why, from my point of view, if you can work with people who are digital experts, they can help you navigate that. But to your point, it's probably going to be a long game. But if you don't start playing it now, you're never going to win. Yeah. So I would say it's probably, even if you are just dipping your toe in the water and testing and learning and trying stuff, start now. Because to your point, the more you do, the more you learn. And that's very easy for me to say when I'm not the one holding the budget of the people, you know, running companies watching this. But I don't think there's any other way.
So looking forward, I mean, I know there's some announcements you've got coming up which you can't tell us about, but can you give us a bit of a sense of the direction of travel then over the next, I mean, I'm not even going to say 5 years because that's ridiculous, but, you know, the next couple of years, I mean, how do you see the digital landscape and 4 Studios' role within it evolving?
Yeah, my team regularly hate me because they often ask for kind of, you know, where are we going to be in 5 years' time? And because of the nature of this, exactly as you said, you know, if I bet my house on where I thought we'd be now 5 years ago, wouldn't have been. So I would say all of this is slightly crystal ball gazing. I think the things that I could definitely say are YouTube ain't going anywhere. So you look at the trajectory of viewing habits. To me, I think the last 15 years have been production companies and broadcasters working out how to take people from TV to streaming. I think the next 15 years will be streaming and YouTube, and people working out how to bring kind of those spaces alive and to how to make them synergize in publishing content and monetizing content. So YouTube, I would bet my house on working out as a business how to make that work. I think the cannibalization point is really interesting. All the data we've seen so far suggests they are not cannibalizing audiences. As YouTube grows in scale, as kind of viewing habits change and evolve, that is something we will be keeping an eye on, and I think everyone should do, because inevitably there could be a tipping point. That's quite interesting. And then I suppose from a content point of view, you know, the worlds of creators and traditional telly are going to continue to merge. I'm personally not a fan of Beast Games on Amazon. It is an interesting example of kind of a show and how those worlds are starting to blur. Netflix just said that they're going to be, you know, trying to work out how to leverage people like Sidemen in developing formats. And so again, I would say I'd bet my house on more creator-led talent starting to migrate into TV formats and vice versa, and that is going to be interesting.
Yeah, and we see how Hot Ones has become a hugely important and valuable property. So it's cracking that digital format could be a real opportunity for production companies who've got that format experience, and so there's a whole new opportunity out there for them.
And Hot Ones, like, it is a brilliant example. It is a rarity in regards to how much that's sold for.
Yeah.
But that does not cost a fortune to make. It really doesn't.
Yeah.
It's some hot wings and some funny people
Yeah.
and a bit of a format and just getting on a junket rotation. So again, when I talk about, I suppose, agility and the evolution of creativity, it's understanding as maybe a more traditional production business, content does not need to act or be made in the same way to be able to find an audience. It's really about, who are we making this for? What is the platform? What works on there? And what do formats look like in maybe a 15-minute kind of proposition rather than a 60-minute? And then starting cheaply and experimenting and building.
A lot of what we're talking about is formats and unscripted. I mean, can you see a time when scripted starts to make a bit of an appearance in the digital first world? I mean, I've seen one or two news stories recently of digital first talent that's been able to, bring in production teams and actually start to invest and launch their own short form scripts and what have you. I mean, do you think that's something that we might see develop over the next year or two?
Scripted?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's going to be trickier. But I don't doubt that there is a world in which you can find that. But again, I think you've got to start from, who am I trying to reach with this content? And actually, where is it going? And where do I think it can find an audience? Hollyoaks is a really good example of something that does banging numbers on every single platform. It may not be something that you see in your TikTok feeds or YouTube feeds, but for fans of that show, and increasingly we're reaching new people through all those accounts, you can find audiences for it, but it might not ever be as big as Hot Ones, but is that what that content is for in the first place?
And maybe the brands have got more of a role to play in that scripted space going forward. So, Matt, thank you very much for joining us on TellyCast. It's been fascinating to have you on the show. Thank you for your time, and best of luck with 4 Studio.
Thank you very much.
Well, that's it for this episode of TellyCast. A big thank you to Matt Risley for joining us and sharing his expertise on the evolving digital landscape. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, rate and review the podcast. It really helps us reach more people and build our community. And remember, you can watch this episode and more exclusive content on the TellyCast YouTube channel. Subscribe today for industry insights, interviews and much more. Thanks for listening. TellyCast was produced by Spirit Studios and recorded in London. We'll be back with another show next week. Until then, stay safe.